Sit back, relax. It's a musical chat. We can all get along if we just sing this song. This verse is that.
Hello and welcome in to the very first episode of This versus That, where we talk about music, what it was like, what happened, what it's like now. This is your host, Michael Leopold.
And that is Bill Forness.
Hey, I'll tell you what, man, what an exciting couple of weeks. We dove right in with a week's worth of bands. Then we went with a week's worth of albums, all in the 90s.
Great decade.
Let's kick it off, man. You do the first one.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, what it was like. At the beginning of the 90s, we get entered into that whole grunge scene. And I got to say, when you dropped the first two bands out of the 2 weeks ago and dropped Soundgarden and Nirvana, I thought, it's on. And then it was a blowout.
Right.
What'd you think of that?
Nirvana takes the backseat to Soundgarden. How is that even really possible, except for Soundgarden's career is longer, more albums, more things Chris Cornell does. I don't. What's your take on it?
My take is, without a doubt, Chris Cornell for me is one of the great rock and roll voices,
Agreed.
Certainly in America, in U.S. rock and roll, but probably transcending, the entire gambit. But Nirvana, especially, Nevermind comes out the gate in 1990, and it's a masterpiece. There's no waiting. They go right to the head of the class as far as musicianship, lyrics, writing, performance, and nailing that whole grunge, kind of defining it and grunge opening the door.
Kind of knocked heavy metal out of the decade.
Right, yeah, basically shut the door at 89 for all the hair bands, who were still, trying to hang on to that fast and hard life. But
who do you got?
I gotta say, for me, I give Soundgarden in the end the nod because of the voice and of the longevity and how they just got better and better. Not taking anything away from Nirvana, because, In Utero might have been better, probably was better than Nevermind.
Right.
And it's a shame we didn't get more out of Kurt and the gang, for sure. But I think for me, in the end, I agree with the group, but I don't think it's the blowout that,
right. What did some of these folks say? I mean, there was quite a few that said tie. Lots of folks said, let's see, Maria Stanley said Soundgarden, but tough choice. But hard to beat Cornell's voice, like you're talking about. Let's see, who was it? Someone said it was Laura Brenner said Soundgarden, no contest.
No contest.
Laura, I need you to come on here and please elaborate the no contest. Because, you cannot deny what Nevermind did and Utero did, what Nirvana did live, what Nirvana added to the music scene in the 90s. We don't know what happened. We don't know what could have happened.
Have happened. And that's why you got to go with what did, unfortunately.
Right.
And I definitely believe that Nirvana would have continued cranking out great albums and found a new, but and maybe even gone on to do some of the things that Cornell went to do, which was go with the Rage guys and do Audio Slave and
solo
Temple of the Dog, all that stuff, was just incredible.
But what about the Foo
showed his range?
Would the Foo Fighters have happened?
Well, there you go. That's the whole thing of accepting what did happen, not what could have been.
I can't choose. I'm going even Steven.
All right.
I'm going even. I can't do it because I just don't. The info's not there for me, really. Honestly, because there's not enough material.
Well, let's dog-ear that. I agreed. Let's dog-ear that one for a second. We may come back to it, but move on to the Chili Peppers versus Rage Against the Machine. Woo. Now, these two bands both speak to me. There is no doubt. And I'm going to tell you what it was like. What it was like was the Red Hot Chili Peppers were one of the first dates my wife and I ever went on at Mississippi Nights.
All right.
And we went to see that. That was Mother's Milk, and got the full Monty from those guys. They played the encores in socks. Flea just doing his thing. Anthony Kiedis just one big muscle. He just leaving it all on the stage. We saw this redhead go into the mosh pit. She was probably about 5'10". She's a good-sized girl, tall, pretty. Went in, came back out with a bloody nose. I mean, just stunned. And I'll never forget that as long as I live. But that was within the first 2 months of dating my wife, and now we've been married 30 years. So I give the edge to the Chili Peppers. Yeah.
Okay, so you got something personal there for sure. So I saw Red Hot Chili Peppers live. I actually met them in 1986 at Track Records.
No way.
Over in Belleville, Illinois, and they were wearing all these funny hats, and I was into metal as a kid, and I kicked myself. I wish I would have got some autographs, and I did not. Look, it came out pretty even. It's pretty 50-50. Maybe a couple extra for Rage. Let's see. Lowe said something about Anthony's autobiography is a great read. I haven't read that, so that's cool. Flea's book, I haven't read that either. So thanks, Lowe. Thanks for the heads up there. I haven't seen Rage Against the Machine live, though, but I have been told that it's an energy to reckon with.
I mean, Zach has got that full-on anger going, and the lyrics, and they're the modern-day almost protest song. It's almost like taking something out of the 60s and bring from a lyric, but a little more in your face, obviously, than the protest songs.
He's an actual freedom fighter.
Seriously.
Right? Yeah, I mean, he actually...
And I love both of these bands bring the funk. You know what I mean? They have that bass line that just makes you want to move, dance, get off your ass for sure.
That's the thing. I think that the bass and the drums in both of these bands are the driving force of both of these bands. Can't say anything. I'm not going to take anything away from the frontman, but the bass and the drum, gosh, man, it's another very...
You better pick. You don't get away with it. You did not get away with it twice.
Oh my! I guess if I'm reaching,
because I'm not saying the Chili Peppers are necessarily better than Rage. Because there's a day that I'm turning Rage on over the Peppers.
There's a day.
But there's something nostalgically and sentimentally that. The Peppers were there in the 80s when I was coming up with music, and then they kind of hit their stride in the 90s, where Rage just comes on the scene with that energy, bullet in the head.
Right. And I love that. Here's the thing. Here's what I'm going to say. And I love Rage for the Rage. Red Hot Chili Peppers, a little bit more wide. You take a song like Under the Bridge.
Yeah.
So...
Rick Rubin, man.
I'm gonna go with the Chili Peppers by a hair. But I haven't seen Rage live either, though. So
I saw them at Lollapalooza here in St. Louis, but they played at 2 p.m, so they were like one of the first or second bands out of the chute, and so the crowd wasn't gathered yet. They weren't, but my buddy and I were right up front and just feeling it, and so I totally dig what they got going on for sure.
All right, great. So next up we went to albums.
Right, the next week we moved on to albums. That's right.
We moved on, and so I think that we decided the most action that came in was Dre's The Chronic or the Beastie Boys' Check Your Head. Oh, man. I guess, I see. I'm going to go with Beastie Boys.
Yeah.
I'm going with Beastie Boys. And here's the thing. And I know we're talking about albums, but I absolutely know what they did, right?
Right.
But I liked the first album. I know it was a little more of a party album, but I liked it. But Check Your Head comes in, and you finally kind of see Beastie Boys come of age.
Yeah,
I
for
think.
sure. That was them kind of reclaiming who they were and kind of sticking the flag in and going, here's where we're headed. Here's our brand.
Yeah, nothing against Dre, and I think that there were some really good points, and I think that you talked about some folks that had some good points about what he opened the door to, and
well, yeah, he brought rap, that brand of rap and that to the suburbs for sure. I mean, I remember I was bartending at McGurk's during this time period, and I was probably one of the older cats working there. And all the young college kids that were the waiters and waitresses and the barbacks, they were all listening to this and totally into Snoop and to Dre. We wouldn't even have Snoop if Dre doesn't bring him in.
Wouldn't even have Eminem,
right?
If Dre doesn't produce him.
And I think my boy, Matt Reedy, brings up the fact that if we don't have the Chronic, you don't have Snoop and Martha Stewart, you don't have Deets Nuts. And you don't have, there was one other thing he said we don't have, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
A G-Funk era of 90s hip-hop.
Yeah, but I mean, it's brilliant. And I love making that connection from an album as to what it was like and what it's like today and how the impact. And if you ever saw that documentary with Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre and how they started on two opposite coasts and end up together doing beats. Oh, I think that was the other thing that Matt Reedy said. We wouldn't have beats without the Chronic. So, I mean, it's just neat how all this stuff swirls together and from a pop culture standpoint, from a soundtrack of our lives to me remembering working at McGurk's and that period of my life when my daughter was born and all my, three of my kids while I worked at McGurk's in 5 years are born and listening to this whole 90s thing,
Okay, so all that aside, without knowing the future, just album versus album, what do you got?
I'm going to go with the Chronic.
Hey,
I'm going with the Chronic. And I'm not,
Now I'm going to go and I'll go re-listen. I'll see.
Yeah.
I'll see where we're at.
That's been great for me this week and last week was to listen to some of these bands again, go back to these earlier albums again and spend some time with them that I hadn't, and that brings me to the next one I want to talk about, which is Radiohead and Counting Crows. I mean, Mr. Jones made me want to, slit my wrists and run outside because it was on the radio too much. It was not the best song on that album, even close. Round Here, pretty good. Lyrically, really solid. But I never gave that album a chance back then because Mr. Jones was like scratching a chalkboard. And Radiohead, for me, Creep was coming of age. They weren't formed yet with that album, Pablo Honey. But there was something there, and you could hear it. Now, there was a chance that they were going to get lost in the grunge. They were kind of thrown in there with Stone Temple Pilots. Creep was out at the same time. Pearl Jam is massive. Tens dropped. So they're kind of being slugged in to that genre, and they kind of getting lost, and that's really not who they are.
Yeah, and I think they got lost in it.
Yeah.
And I think we saw that going forward. But even just these two as a standalone, which?
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's hard for me not to have the bias of becoming a Radiohead fan as they found their genius and getting to the bends and getting that. But now, having gone back and listened to both albums song for song, and I can let's take out the two hits. Let's take out Creep and let's take out Mr. Jones. Suddenly, August and everything after is looking really, really good and sounding really good.
I think it was a brilliant album. I got the opportunity to see them at the American Theater, them first out on the road. Adam Duritz, got to meet him outside of the American Theater, and he was pretty distraught. His father was not in good health, and he wasn't able to go be with him in California, but they had to stay on the road, and that's a part of the biz. You got to tour, you got to sell this record. But I agree with you, Mr. Jones, and I thought it was kind of a ripoff in the melody of Brown Eyed Girl. And I thought, man, wow, what a, they're really trying to sell this.
Well, it didn't sound like the rest of the album.
It didn't.
It didn't fit the
Not at all.
vibe nearly at all. It was almost like, hey, we need a hit so that people will buy this album. We need something. And maybe that worked, because I have a lot of friends who were all talking about the deep cuts on that album, not about Mr. Jones at all. Everybody's mentioning Blue Buildings, and everybody's mentioning Anna Begins. Right. And those are really good. Yeah, it is. And I know that there are some of my friends out there, my Radiohead friends, that are going to be, Michael, what are you doing? And look, we're not saying Counting Crows is a better band. Right. Right? We're saying this album against that album at that moment, and maybe even today. The cool thing for me is the Counting Crows album, while I didn't give it a chance then, I've given it a chance now, is now up there in my playlist and enjoying it.
It was really good live. Yeah. They played that entire album live, and I'll tell you, though, musicianship-wise, fantastic. His vocals live, fantastic. I haven't seen Radiohead live, but this album, I went through and I listened to it, and though you can see some glimpses there of what was coming in the future, some of it just sort of fell short. It was a little noisy. You could definitely see the U2 influence. I heard the U2 influence, which I thought was interesting, because I thought that they were being shoved into this 90s sort of, let's hurry up and capture the money off the grunge scene. The grunge scene. Right. I would imagine
the record company
I think
more
it
than
was.
them.
I guarantee it was. Yeah. I would almost imagine it was, because they weren't from here.
No, right? No, they're from the UK.
Okay, so yeah, probably.
And they're influenced by Joy Division, as
Joy Division
for sure, and the Pixies. You can definitely hear some experimental stuff there that feels a lot like that.
It looked like a lot of the folks picked Counting Crows.
Yeah.
I guess probably just for this album.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think it's for the band in a whole.
No, and I think we'll definitely bring Radiohead back, again, to talk about their larger body of work. This was, we want to make sure that everybody recognizes this is about this album against that album.
Yeah.
And again, there are no right or wrong answers here. Yeah. This is all, that's why music is so subjective. It inspires us. It visits us in a time of our life that impacts us, and we fall in love.
Even
Jim
Stopler
out of love.
Jim Stopler said, "Crows, Omaha, somewhere in Middle America." See that? It's that song. Great song. That stuff just didn't hit the radio.
Is that Jim Stepler? You said
Stepler. Yeah. Is that how?
That's
okay.
Boy, he's in the UK. He's in London,
and he loves Crows,
he loves
Omaha.
Crows,
So all right, that's great. Okay, do you want me to get the next one?
Yeah, go ahead. Bro.
Let's see.
Dookie.
Oh my gosh! So this is the wrap up, right?
Well, this is the last one we're going to talk about.
Okay,
for sure.
Let's see here. Let me just go ahead and say, folks, make sure that you comment, put some comments in here as we keep going with this. We really hope that you like it. Give us some thumbs up, share this stuff. But yeah, put some comments. Let us know why.
Yeah, and let us know some things you'd like to hear us talk about.
Yeah,
and get involved in the conversation.
Yeah. Let's see. I'll announce and then you go. Okay, you ready? We got
me on the spot.
We got 1994,
right
the
on.
year of our Lord. You got Green Day's Dookie,
I almost gave you a spit take there.
or Weezer, affectionately known as the Blue Album, but both is their freshman effort.
Yeah, their self-titled album. Yeah. Wow. This one is funny because if you'd have asked me in '94, no contest, I'm saying Dookie all the way. I mean, I just dug that whole punk rock revival that Green Day kind of brought to the forefront, for sure. I thought Weezer, what they come out with, Sweater and Buddy Holly were maybe the first two songs to drop from there, and I almost felt like they were like a little bit of a novelty. I did enjoy the tongue-in-cheek kind of humor that they had, that you could tell they didn't take themselves seriously. And it reminded me, and later on they really reminded me of a band that I knew in the 80s and loved, and totally a novelty, was the Dead Milkmen. You'll Dance to Anything, Punk Rock Girl, stuff like that, where it's fun, it's good, but it's not going to win any awards for writing. They're just having a good time, right? And that's part of the fun. But in this case, I listened to Weezer today, and I'm a big Weezer fan now. I give Weezer the edge.
Wow.
Well, I give Weezer the edge album for album, but I gotta say, I still love Green Day. So and I love that album. I love that album. Longview, first song that comes out of the gate on that one. Couldn't get enough of that song.
Yeah. And you said something that kind of struck me, because I saw Green Day as this. Brian Setzer and the Stray Cats in the 80s come out, and they're this complete throwback to rockabilly in the 50s
right.
during a time in the 80s where it's like pop, explosion, sort of this electronica thing is beginning to happen.
Yeah.
The 80s have a very particular sound, and then here's the Stray Cats coming out on MTV, and it was like, what?
Yeah.
What is that? Green Day felt very similar to that in the midst of grunge and everything that way.
Yeah.
And alternative, and then all of a sudden you got this throwback to the Ramones.
Right. That's a great description, and probably how they were able to set themselves kind of apart and grab some of the marketplace, a pretty good, which led to an unbelievable career. It's always cool. Much like a hitter in baseball, there's some guys that you can just see the silhouette of their swing or their stance, and you know exactly who it is. You see the silhouette of Billy Joe with that guitar slung low and his feet wide apart. If I just see that silhouette, it's iconic, And I love the energy that comes out of those guys, but I love the intelligence and the fun that Weezer is having.
It is. I think they sometimes call it nerd rock or something like that. And I get that, because I do think, but man, the guitars are tasty for Weezer.
Oh, yeah.
They're really clever. And his songwriting structure is really clever as well, and they're, I like it lyrically. I gotta say though that I do think that Green Day, just as a cohesiveness of the record, just edges it out a little bit for me.
I like
and
that.
I think some folks. So Gina Hart said back then, Green Day. Mm-hmm. Not sure what I would choose today.
That's kind of how I am. Exactly.
So it's interesting. I'd have to listen to both. I'd really have to give both its due. It's really hard to say today. Then too as well. Green Day for sure. When it came on, it was like, wow, man, that's really good. And Weezer, I wasn't even quite so sure about in the beginning. I had to. That is much more of a thought process type of group.
And you know what? That's how. It's funny. I don't know if this is like anybody out there listening or with you, but the music that I kind of like or have to work harder to like, I tend to like for a lot longer. They become almost a part of my soul or a part of me. Where music that you like really fast and easy, they're great, but they're here and gone. You know what I mean? Right.
The concept of a hook, and
right.
That's exactly what it does. The other thing is a little bit more intelligent in its songwriting and clever maneuvering within chordal structures and stuff like that.
Right.
I'm in total agreement.
Yeah.
Danny Valentine said Dookie, because once I gave it a real listen, the backing vocals sounded exactly like my brothers in St. Louis' very own The Nukes. I guess Billy Joe learned from the best. Can't fault him for that. No, I don't know if that's really true or not. Hey,
we know Danny. Danny's definitely had a history of in the music business. He worked for Street Side Records at the executive level here in St. Louis for a number of years and met a lot of these guys coming through. So I give Danny some total street cred on his. I don't always agree with him, but he's coming from a place that's real. It isn't just pulled out of his ass. That's for sure.
So I'm going Green Day just by a hair. I got to give Weezer, and then but we're not talking about the bands.
Yeah.
If we're talking about the longevity. Hey, man.
Hey, Bull, Green Day's already in the freaking Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It's hard to touch. And they've definitely been able to. Weezer's probably been putting out more music on a regular basis, in the last few years than Green Day.
But I'll say their music too is sort of in a vacuum, where Green Day like expanded when they did some acoustic numbers and big ballads.
Yeah,
and
well, they did the rock opera. They did the rock opera on Broadway. You know, with American Idiot. That was a really cool album because that thing told a story. I mean, that thing, you know, was very thoughtful in how it layered the songs and laid them out, and they were telling a story, and then it turned into something bigger than I think they could have ever imagined. You know,
Green Day was my nephew's favorite band, so.
Right on.
There you go.
So, in just a recap, I did want to circle back to Nirvana again, really quick. If I remember, you remember Spin magazine when that was out. I always loved that magazine. I thought that they kind of took it to Rolling Stone there for a period of time. They weren't out for very long, but I remember them doing a piece on after the end of the decade of the '90s. They kind of did a piece on the best albums of the '90s, and they went through everything. And I mean, there's some bands. When I read through that, I'm like, oh man, we should have had them in the list. We should have had, and we're gonna get to them if we last out here in podcast land. We're gonna get to them. But Nirvana, Nevermind was the number one. They determined was the number one album of the decade.
Is that right?
So you know, Soundgarden on notice.
All right, we'll come back to it again. Man, I had a lot of fun today. This is great. I'll look forward to the second one.
Absolutely, Bill. Thanks for giving your opinions and helping start this versus that.
Guys, let us know. Look forward to hearing more from you guys.
And get out there and support your local music if you can, safely, and have some fun. Concerts are starting to come back a little bit, and there's nothing like live music.
That's right. I have a show September 25th at the Lincoln Theater. Selfless plug.
I love it. That's why I said we should do this to increase your fan base, baby.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, if you guys
Appreciate
don't know, he does a Johnny Cash tribute show, and it is fan-fucking-tastic. So do yourself a favor and get out to the Lincoln Theater on the 25th, I think.
25th, yeah.
Of September.
JCashTribute.com.
Go get yourself some Beast Barbecue over there in Illinois, and then jump on.
Beast Barbecue rocks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, it does.
All right, man. We'll see you next time
you
on
next
This
time.
Versus That.
This versus that. This versus that. This versus that. Sit back, relax. It's a musical chat. We can all get along if we just sing this song. This versus that.